Welcome back to the show, Friday Football Feast. We're trying to track down Lavelle, which is always a crapshoot, but hopefully we will be chatting with him shortly. Did you know St. Paul's getting an arena football team and that the Arena Football League is even back? It is a thing. It is reforming after being defunct for 4 years and will start play next year, 2024, the Arena Football League with 16 teams. Last we saw the AFL, the Arena Football League, it had withered down to 6 NFL teams. That's it. But now there's so much more competition. Now you've got the XFL, right, that played. You've got the fan-controlled football league, which I'm a fan of. We've got those. Is there an appetite in this town for arena football? Apparently, I mean, somebody, I don't know who the owner is, somebody's decided to bring arena football to St. Paul.
You know what I say? Just like Mike Zimmer, you can never have enough quarterbacks. You can never have enough football. That's what I say.
And there's some truth to that. The American public just insatiable, right?
They eat it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eat it up. Just like this immaculate grid thing that has taken off. And now the NFL, the immaculate grid, have you played it yet? The new game that's been, the new digital craze that's been going on?
No. Is this newer than pickleball? Yes.
No. This is a game involving sports stats and facts and stuff you could play online, kind of like Wordle.
So it's Wordle for sports?
It's kind of the sports thing. So basically, it's the immaculate grid based on the immaculate inning, which would be 3 batters, 9 pitches, and 9 strikes and 3 strikeouts. So you have kind of a grid of 3 by 3, and then kind of it crosses over. So like you would have to name somebody that played for the Vikings and the Packers and also had a 1,000-yard season or something like that. So you kind of fill them in, and it's kind of a brain teaser. And they started with the baseball one. Baseball Reference immediately scooped it up, and now they have a football one, and it's a lot of fun. I'm sure a lot of people out there have played already, but now you can play too.
Yeah. Lavelle asked for you to call him. So I'm going to share his number with you, but off air. So hang on. Now, you'd think by now Lavelle would know the hotline number. He's been doing bits on this station for 20 years. You would think Lavelle would have it in his phone, but we'll catch up with Lavelle in just a second. Arena football to me was, I don't know, fun to watch in highlights, but I don't think I've ever watched a full Arena League game front to back. And it seems to me like the appeal for Arena League was always that they were in smaller markets that didn't have pro football. We have that here, obviously. So it seemed like it was successful at the Cedar Rapids and Omaha level, not necessarily for big cities. I don't know. If it's St. Paul getting the arena football team, I assume they're playing in the XL. But that seems like that's a big spot. XL holds what, 18,000 people? Is the Arena Football League really going to get 18,000? I don't know, maybe, but it doesn't feel that way to me. So I don't know. We'll see if there's an appetite for it, but we're getting it next year. Arena football coming this, so you could have made a case that women's soccer wouldn't be a hit here, but the Aurora were tremendously successful. Maybe there is an appetite for more different sports than we think. All right, good. Let's go to Lavelle. Hi, Lavelle.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Nice to talk to you. It's been forever.
Yeah, it has. I hope all is well with you and your teenager son.
Yeah, daughter, but thank you. Yes.
Daughter,
absolutely.
sorry.
No, it's okay. That's all right. You guys haven't met, I don't think. So that's, at some point your paths will have to cross.
Like I said, I was floored to find out that you had offspring that old.
Well, the really amazing thing is that anybody would procreate with me.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, what are the odds? I think that's really what you're thinking of right now. And I can't say I blame you whatsoever.
So you got someone to take over the fantasy empire once you decide to hang them up.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to work out that way. I would have loved it if it would have, but that's just not where we're headed, unfortunately.
She's not into that stuff?
No, tragically not. But lots of cool stuff that we do have in common, like music and movies, TV shows. So we get to bond over a lot of other stuff. We play board games, video games. Yeah, so life's good. Just not fantasy football, which is okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's talk Twins trade deadline. What's the day, by the way, for the trade? I know it's close. What do we like 10 days away?
I believe August 2nd is the trade deadline. I wouldn't expect any fireworks from the Twins because their draft capital is kind of low right now. You know, last year, you know, they tried to deal from a position of strength. They had they traded Spencer Steer and Christian Encarnacion Strand to the Reds for Tyler Mahle, which is blown up because Mahle is broken down and probably will never pitch again for the Twins because he's coming back from Tommy John. He's going to be a free agent. But they felt that was a position of strength because they traded Steer when they knew they had Julian, and they traded Encarnacion Strand when they knew they had Jose Miranda and Royce Lewis. So Strand just got called up this week and homered in his first, I believe his first plate appearance with the Reds, of course, or at least first game. And Steer's been a steady contributor to the Reds. So it's been painful for some Twins to watch that development when the Twins are struggling with offense. But
I know.
All of a sudden, offense has come along. So I think there's a better chance of them trading for bullpen help than it is to trade for a bat. Because if they're going to engage in trade conversations with teams, as soon as they say, hey, we need X hitter, it could be Adam Duvall, it could be Teoscar Hernandez, it could be Paul Goldschmidt. The first request is going to be, well, we want Royce Lewis.
No.
And Twins aren't going there with that.
No.
You know.
And
that's
well,
a no-go, so.
Let me dive in on Royce Lewis for just a second. He's going to come back sometime in August. Is he effectively the acquisition at the deadline?
Well, I mean, theoretically, something like that, it could be. You know, you could argue that Caleb Dilbar, who should be getting healthy soon after the, I think it's an oblique strain, could be looked at that way too as a bullpen boost. Brock Stewart, who was very effective in the first half, and he broke down. He'll be coming back soon. You can argue that he's an acquisition as well. So, getting healthy is important to the Twins' cause here as the games get more and more crucial and important. Plus, I don't know who's going to be out there in terms of a bat. There's some guys out, you know, there'll be some guys available, but I just think the asking price is beyond what the Twins are willing to go for. So,
okay.
But they find another flamethrower. I was really upset because Baltimore just traded for Fujinami, the right-hander from the Oakland A's who throws 100 miles an hour. And I was like, when I saw him pitch against the Twins last week, I was like, man, this guy looked good in the Twins bullpen. 2 days later, he's in Baltimore. Like, damn, I wonder if the Twins talk to Oakland for this guy because he's got a great arm. I mean, he definitely would help. I mean, we all saw Jorge Lopez scuffle yesterday and get jeered off the field because he hit a couple batters and left with the bases loaded. And you're wondering, do we have a bridge builder to get to the ninth inning in Joan Duran? And it may be kind of a hodgepodge thing right now because you can't trust Lopez. Pagan, who I defended earlier in the season, has finally started to pitch well. Maybe he can assume that role. Griffin Jackson's been surprisingly effective. He pops up among the list of better relievers in the league in a few categories right now. But I would still be looking for another bullpen arm to throw in the mix there because you can't have enough good relievers, man. So if anything happens for the trade deadline, I think that will be the way to go.
Aaron Gleeman is of the opinion that the Twins are most likely to move on a right-hander, and that he notes that they're dead last in ops against lefties. That should be something you could do without having to mortgage a significant amount of your future.
In theory, you could get a reliever for maybe some A-ball prospect or AA prospect who's not high on your list. But there's going to be machinations that go on with that because the teams are going to try to play the dance game and see if they can extract, the next Jeff Bagwell for, what was it, Larry Anderson, I think the trade was? Or when the Twins sent Wilson Ramos to the Nationals for Matt Capps, and fans were mad because they thought you shouldn't trade an everyday player for a reliever, things like that. So they got to play the game and do the dance to go back and forth with proposals until they settle on something. But I think if they do trade for a reliever, it's going to be a right-hander. Because actually, Giovanni Moran's been okay as a lefty, and they're getting Dilbar back. So it would make sense to me that they would try to look for a right-handed reliever to help build that bridge to the ninth inning.
Do you think the Twins have got a playoff caliber rotation as it stands right now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's playoff caliber. And I'm saying that even though this last trip through the rotation, I mean, Pablo Lopez looked much better yesterday against Seattle than he did in the outing against Oakland. Joe Ryan got blasted out of the park in Oakland. Who else started there? It was Ryan. It was Pablo. Kenta Maeda needed 80 pitches in 3 innings against the A's, like the worst team in baseball. Yeah. Well, since then, Maeda pitched much better against Seattle. Ober was effective, and Pablo Lopez was better. So maybe there was just a little blip in the screen because I was counting the bullpen as the reason why they needed to improve the offense, because you can't waste this bullpen. I mean, at the All-Star break, the ERA of the starting rotation was like 3.5. Mm-hmm. And I went down the rabbit hole, tried to look up the last time they had a rotation ERA that low, and I had to go back to Jim Cobb, Bert Blyleven, and Jim Perry.
Jeez, we're going.
It was like 72. It was ridiculous. It was better. It was better than the 87 and 91 rotations. So this is a unique year in which, they've been really effective on the mound, and you've got to do right by them. You can't waste this bullpen. I mean, this rotation, because I think like in 2019 when they had the Bomber Squad, I think they wasted one of the best offenses the Twins have ever had by not adding pitching to help the cost. So you can't. The script is flipped now. Now they have a great rotation. They need to do what they can to boost the offense. But if Kirilloff and Julian are going to hit the way they've been hitting, man,
that helps.
It's not going to matter. I mean, Julian's batting 500 this month. I mean, that's ridiculous. And he's batting 378 since he was called up on June 10th with a 1091 OPS. Kirilloff is batting 333 with a 955 OPS over his last 17 games. Those two have single-handedly revitalized this offense. And Correa now is not afraid to hit the ball tops of the field. He's getting on base more. I was advocating that he be dropped to 6 in the order. Rocco moves him up to the leadoff spot, and he starts to thrive. It's amazing how those things happen in baseball. So there's a lot of stuff going on with the Twins right now. Some of it's positive, especially with the offense. But it'll be interesting to see what they come out with at the trade deadline, because Falvey and Levine, they don't like sitting out deadlines. They feel like you either try to get better or you try to reload at the deadline. So I think they're going to do something, because I think it's just their nature to be part of the transaction wire at that time of year.
Is there anything left to say about the Byron Buxton situation? Is he's now mired in an 0 for 26 slump? But I feel like it's sort of talked out at this point, because this is the third time he's had a 20-plus hitless streak this year.
Yeah, we just taped the Chin Music Bob podcast, which is myself, Jim Suhan, and Roy Smalley. We spent, it will be available this afternoon, and we spent a lot of time talking about Buxton. And it's hard to watch right now because it's in his head now. I think it's mentally affected him.
Gotta be.
His one good at bat in the road trip was in Oakland with the bases loaded when he drew the bases loaded walk. And I was watching him between pitches, and he's taking these huge deep breaths. I mean, I was like, this guy's just trying to keep it together. He is trying to keep it together, man. Yeah. It's in his head. He's frustrated. He's lost his confidence. And then the other troubling sign to me was when he told Phil Miller to start Tribune, and that he's still trying to figure out what to do in between at bats. I was like, man, he should have this figured out by now.
Yeah, right. It's not a rookie. No. Buxton, as you may know, he's slated to have his third baby this weekend. Maybe he's just going to have some time away from the team.
Yep. Parental leave would be great. Maybe he can clear his mind, think about what's important in life, and get back. I can't wait to hear the name of this kid, because this first kid was Brixton. I think the second kid was Blaze. So I can't wait to find out the name of the baby number 3 for Buxton. So
this is a story I haven't told in a long time, but it just popped to mind. In training camp one year, Ontario Smith had a baby, and it came up in a presser. And so somebody asks Ontario Smith the spelling of the baby's name so that he can be sure to get it right in print. And Ontario Smith couldn't spell the name of his own kid.
That means Mama came up with the name, and he just signed off on it.
I guess so. Like, all right, whatever you want.
Jeez. You think when you fill out the birth certificate, you want to pay attention to what name you're putting down.
you would think so. Jeez. What do you?
Here's the other thing too. Byron's not a DH. He's not. He's an outfielder. And my thing is this: is that if his knee's giving him problems and he's not hitting, put him on IL and let him get healthy. And if he doesn't get healthy for the rest of the year, punt. Because it can't get any worse at this point. When you're 0 for 26, and you had 3 hitting droughts this season with at least 0 for 16, 0 for 17. He's done it at least 3 times this year.
Yeah.
It's time for some drastic action because it's not working. He's still pull happy. He used to be able to hit line drives over the second baseman's head.
Yeah.
He's not doing that. I was applauding him in Seattle just for putting the bat in the ball yesterday.
It's sad that it's come to that.
You know, even though he popped out and hit a couple ground balls, I was like, well, at least he's putting the ball in play because it's been looking ugly. And I think he struck out in his last at bat. But the thing is, there's a lot of stuff coming up with this roster in the coming weeks. With Polanco coming back, with Royce Lewis coming back, they may need that DH spot more than ever because they got to make a decision if how Polanco and Julian are going to coexist in the same lineup. Julian doesn't deserve to be removed from the lineup the way he's swinging it. Does he become a DH? Does Polanco go to third? What happens when Lewis gets back online? They got to start thinking what's best for this team going down the stretch in the playoff race. It's going to leave some hard decisions, and they may be approaching a hard decision with Buxton about how they use him the rest of the season.
Some texts have come into the Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line. People are saying, why at this point, why not just put Buxton back in the field? Because at least you'll get a defensive glove, and if you're gonna use him anyway, you may as well get the defense out of it.
Well, that's my thing, is that if his knee is not allowing him to play the outfield like Rocco intimated a few weeks ago, and he's not hitting, then he's of no use to you. I know that he's making a pretty penny. It's like $50 million a year. You're right. I'm not ready to call him a washed up, broken down ball player. I think there's still a lot of talent in there, and this year it's just not working. And if he needs to be shut down for the rest of the year to get his knee right and start thinking in terms of coming back, as a badass in 2024, then maybe that's an angle they need to take. But to me, if he's not going to hit, then he shouldn't be on the field at all in any capacity.
It's come to that for Byron Buxton, which is crazy. Okay, just one or two more things for you, and we need to get out in about the next minute or two. And then we got Blake Baratz. We now have got a Blake Baratz official sighting coming up on this next segment.
How'd you swing that one?
I know. Well, there's a lot going on for Blake right now, and he's carved out a little window of time for it, which I appreciate. But this whole running back thing with the running back contracts is fascinating. And Blake's got a running back under contract, a starting running back in the NFL, Rashad White. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Women's World Cup starts tonight against Vietnam. Your level of interest?
Very interested. Here's the thing about women's soccer versus men's soccer. Less flopping. Men act as soon as their force field around their bodies is invaded by someone else's force field, they fall down on the ground and grab their head, even though they were touched on the hip, or pretend that they're about to die. Women, and studies have proven this. Women don't flop nearly as much as men.
Love it.
When they go down, it's because they're really hurt.
Yeah.
So you're going to see possession. You're going to see passing. You're going to see goals from distance. It's going to be quality entertainment. Okay. The United States is the gold standard of Women's World Cup play. They're going for their third consecutive cup. This may be their weakest team just because of injuries, because like Sam Mewis is injured, Becky Sauerbrunn is out, and Megan Rapinoe's 38, and she's going to be on limited minutes. Rose Lavelle is going to be on limited minutes. Oh, by the way, I am thrilled to be alive right now because the women's team has a player named Lavelle, and the men's team has a player named Neal.
Perfect.
I was like, I got to get jerseys for both of them.
Now, can we hook them up? Can they have a baby?
Oh, I don't know. That's a great question.
I mean, then they could have a Lavelle Neal.
Well, Jalen Neal's only 19, and I think Rose is like in her 30s. So there's going to be a little bit of an age discrepancy there.
It's not impossible. Hey, Lavelle, I appreciate the time. I'm up against it. Blake's got a tight window that I need to hit to get to him. But thank you for chatting.
Yeah, you got to talk to someone more important than me. I understand. Go talk about the running back conundrum.
Can we have whiskey soon?
Okay.
Let's do it. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. Lavelle E. Neal, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. Nice enough to join.
Goodbye.
When we come back, Blake Baratz. I want to talk about the state of the running back marketplace because obviously it's turned completely upside down, and now we've got a lot of talk about this topic. We'll get Blake's thoughts on where we are running back contract-wise.
On the Fan.
The Fan and MXD Exteriors want to give you a shot to put $1,000 in your hand with our national cash contest. Enter the keyword grand for the 9 a.m. hour and credit for the 10 a.m. hour. We'll get you that 11 a.m. hour covenant word next.
Yeah.
Enter the keyword credit for the 10 a.m. hour, grand for the 9 a.m. hour at KFAN.com for your shot at winning. That's keyword grand for the 9 a.m. hour and credit for the 10 a.m. hour. We'll get you that 11 a.m. hour next as it's a covenant cleanup. Enter it now at KFAN.com.
A frequent contributor to this show, 9 to noon, is Blake Baratz, a local sports agent, owner and founder of IFA. Notable athletes in the IFA family include C.J. Ham, Adam Thielen, and Buccaneers starting running back Rachaad White. Hi, Blake. Great to talk to you again.
Hey, Charles. How are you?
Good.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, and thank you for carving out time in a very busy day. I was working with you and trying to find a little window of time. But this has turned into such a big story, and you're right in the middle of it. The devaluation of the running back marketplace from a contract standpoint. I'm sure it affects you and it affects your clients. What are your big picture thoughts on this?
Big picture thoughts. I mean, I saw this coming a mile away. It's like under a salary cap system, you're going to provide value at some dollar amount that the team thinks is acceptable. And in a salary cap system, all they're trying to do is pay players A, B, C, and D as cheap as they can so they can go sign E, F, G, and H. And running backs take a lot of hits. And the NFL only pays you on what they're projecting moving forward.
Yeah.
So they don't pay you on what you did historically. And I don't think the running backs are necessarily devalued. I think general managers and salary cap experts are actually getting smarter. But to me, it has nothing to do with position. It has to do with what is the value to the team. I don't know. Is George Kittle worth less than Jalen Waddle? Because he's a tight end in the media guide and is in the tight end room? I would argue no. But that's the system. There's only so many dollars to spend.
So do you think that middle tier players are getting squeezed out as money goes? There's a lot more money being poured up into quarterbacks and other highly paid positions, and it just doesn't leave enough for running backs?
I think it all comes down to leverage at any position.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really difficult to get leverage in the National Football League. The best players don't get to free agency. And
right.
that's your maximum leverage. Kirk Cousins was the highest paid quarterback in football, not necessarily because he's the best quarterback in football. He got to free agency. Patrick Mahomes isn't getting to free agency.
No.
Saquon Barkley can't get to free agency. Lamar Jackson can't get to free agency. Jamar Chase is not going to get to free agency. And that's ultimately your value, is your leverage. And running backs have no leverage, let alone when you make them play out their fourth year and fifth year option. Then they have the ability to keep you at a franchise tag, which is a fraction of your market value. So the system is set up for the position to have even less value, but it's really set up for no one to have value. It's hard to get leverage.
Why is it so?
If Saquon Barkley was on the open market, my guess is someone does pay him $15 or $16 or $17 million a year. So is the running back devalued, or is the system the problem?
Why can't running backs get leverage like a wide receiver can?
Wide receivers have trouble getting leverage too. Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill were the best receivers in football, and they had to force their way out to get paid.
Yeah.
So if those teams wanted to, they could have franchised them. But some teams chose to say, "Hey, Devontae Adams was a great Samaritan. He's great in the community. He's a great receiver. He's done everything we've asked. We'll honor your request." So, in the Tyreek Hill situation, they decided they're not going to pay him $30 million a year, so they might as well get value in return. Running backs are more interchangeable than some of the other positions, but it doesn't change the fact that it's hard for any player in the National Football League to get leverage. Lamar Jackson was unanimous MVP of the league, and he had to go play his fifth year out. But if you're a third-round pick or fourth-round pick or second-round pick and you don't perform, you're getting cut. But if you're really good, the NFL teams have a mechanism to franchise you and keep you at a fraction of your market value. So teams devalue running backs in general because they think you're going to get hurt at some point because of the pounding you're taking.
Yes.
But it's a bigger picture issue that it's really hard to get leverage in the National Football League.
Don't you think part of it is also that the perception, and I think statistically and analytically it'd be backed up, running backs are more interchangeable and they're better younger in their career than they are later in their career, and that their career arc tails off really fast and at a young age. We used to talk about running backs being old at 30, Blake. Now we talk about running backs being old at 27, like Dalvin Cook is 27 and on the open market.
100%. And if your choice is pay a running back $15 million a year with $30 or $35 million guaranteed, or drafting a running back in the third round for, $1.3 million guaranteed, it kind of becomes a no-brainer. It doesn't mean they're not valuable to the organization, but every team has to decide where they're going to allocate their dollars. And the San Francisco 49ers can pay a running back that does a lot of things and plays receiver and is a great player because they're not paying a quarterback $50 million a year.
Right.
Everyone has to allocate how they want to allocate. But yeah, I agree with you. Running backs you can find often, and it's a copycat league. And Kansas City has 7th round running back outplaying a 1st round running back.
They do. Clyde Edwards-Helaire spent the Super Bowl on the bench, and Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th round led them. And
what I will add to that though is Saquon Barkley did everything the right way.
Yeah,
and he's a fan favorite, and he's great in the community, and he put that team on his shoulders. And he's great in the passing game. Value doesn't just mean what you bring on the football field. Guys in the locker room talk. Mm-hmm. So if you're not going to take care of one of your stars over $3 million a year, if you don't think the rest of the locker room is talking about that, then I think that's a miss. And I'm not saying they should pay him $13 or $15 million a year, or they should make him play under the franchise tag. I'm not saying what the New York Giants should do, but to just pin value on what position you play and stats, I think is also misguided.
And I assume that some of that does factor in for teams, but at the end of the day, it's still a numbers business, and I think it feels like sometimes good players just get cut anyway, and it doesn't necessarily matter that you're a great locker room guy, great community guy. That stuff helps you, and if you're bad at those things, it can get you cut for sure. But those are intangibles that at the end of the day, I don't know that those move the needle a lot. You tell me.
Yeah.
You've been a part of many, many negotiations with players. If you're a great guy, CJ Ham, right? Elite human being by all accounts. Every interaction I've ever had with the guy is A+. How much does it matter, regardless of position, that you are a great person, great locker room person, and somebody that the team wants to be associated with?
Well, how much does it matter, or how much do I think it should matter? I think it should matter, but you still have to be at the top of your game for it to matter more. Mm-hmm. Like CJ Ham is one of the top paid fullbacks in the league, but he also does a lot of different things. He can catch the ball. He can play on special teams. He can block. He does a lot of different things. I happen to think that you should overpay for intangibles, character, work ethic, coachability, leadership. I happen to put more value on that than maybe other teams do or other people do. But I think that's the difference. I think that's why guys like CJ Ham can make it. That's why guys like Adam Thielen can perform at a high level, because they're treating season 11 like they're an undrafted rookie. And I know how complicated an NFL rookie's life is, or a second-year guy, and that stuff matters. It really does. I have other Carolina Panthers. What they've told me that Adam is bringing to that team and that organization and that offense and that wide receiver group, you can't put a dollar figure on that.
Yeah,
you can't put a dollar figure on you can apply it to a 40-yard dash or statistics, but making everybody else better, how do you put a dollar figure on that? So I personally think it's really important. Doesn't mean that I think the Giants should pay Saquon Barkley or not. I just know it matters. And to make a guy play for 5 years and then still not have the ability to get their market value, I think is a problem. But I also think it could have been addressed earlier. Like, if you're not going to re-up a guy after year 3 or year 4, and we know we're going to part ways, then let's do it at a certain point. Because if you don't want to pay me, that's fine. I may disagree with you, but somebody else will. So let me control my own destiny. And I think there's flaws on both sides of the equation.
There are a lot, some fans that are listening right now, Blake, would say, I don't want my favorite players to leave. I love Saquon Barkley. I don't want him to just hit the open market and just go take the highest dollar somewhere else. I want to become emotionally attached to these players as Minnesota Vikings. And I don't want my star player hitting the open market because I want to see that player in purple for the rest of his career. Do you have some empathy for that?
Yeah, sure, but the franchise tag was put in place at a certain point in time. I don't know when it was, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, to give the player, it was almost a happy medium between let's not let our star player go and we're stuck in a contract negotiation, so we're going to give you the compensation that equates to what a franchise player will get. Mm-hmm. But the NFL revenues have skyrocketed to the point where it's done the opposite effect. So Saquon Barkley doesn't even have the ability to find out what's on the open market. Lamar Jackson really never had the opportunity to find out what's on the open market. If that was similar to what the team was offering, then great. Maybe he decides to come back because he is a fan favorite, and maybe the opportunities off the field or off the court are insurmountable. But those players don't have the ability to find out, which is my issue with how it's set up. But yeah, of course, like fan favorites, they don't want to leave. But if you're playing at a high level and you're forced to leave, or it's economically advantageous for the team to force them to leave, then it's a system. It's a business. So I get it.
All right. I know you're short on time. One last thing for you, Blake. Blake Baratz is a local sports agent. He's been on the show. We get you on the show, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a year. It's always great to talk to you. I don't feel like the owners are just being cheap here with running backs, because most of these teams are at or very near the salary cap limit. So I don't know. I don't think there's like an institutional effort by these owners to not pay players. They're just not paying running backs because they don't think they have to, right? That they can get performance from guys that cost a lot less.
Correct. And I don't think it's the owners. I don't think it's the owners, frankly. I think it's the GMs and the salary cap negotiators. And I think historically everyone would believe you have to have a quarterback to win in the National Football League, or you're at a severe disadvantage if you don't. So you better allocate some resources or a lot of resources to that position if that's what you believe, which I think is true. So I think the teams are saying it never works out to pay a running back $14 million a year or $16 million a year. Doesn't mean they're not extremely valuable to the team.
Yeah.
But if you have a mechanism to pay them less, you're going to. The same way you're going to pay everybody else less if you have a mechanism to do so. They didn't pay Daniel Jones because they thought he was a top 10 quarterback in football.
Yeah.
He had some leverage. What were the options? What were they going to do?
Oh, basically none.
Not pay him?
Yeah.
And then what?
Yeah.
And then your job as a coach is on the line. Your job as an offensive coordinator is on the line. Your job as a
general manager,
GM, is on the line. You if you find a quarterback, even if they're a top 10 or top 12 or top 15, you think that's good enough to win a Super Bowl, then you got your guy. It doesn't mean that he's more valuable to the New York Giants than Saquon Barkley.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, Blake.
Thanks, Charge. Always a pleasure.
All right, we'll be in touch soon. Thank you very much. Blake Baratz represents a number of Vikings and other players as well, and is somebody we like to go to when things related to contracts, players, stuff like that come up. We like to check in with Blake, and we will do so again in the future, I'm sure. Final segment coming up. Ode to a Dead Guy is a bumper-to-bumper bit. We are going to do our version of Ode to a Dead Guy that I'm very confident bumper-to-bumper is going to miss. They're going to hit somebody else today. I'm going to tell you a fascinating story about a guy that passed yesterday that at one point was one of the most wanted men in the country. Find out who it is when we...
Great way to listen to the Fan.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
The Fan and MXD Exteriors want to give you a shot to put $1,000 in your hand with our national cash contest. Enter the keyword check, as in checkmate, at KFAN.com for your shot at winning. That's keyword check. Enter it now at KFAN.com. I get a little Billy Joel in before the end of the show, Charge.
I think Tony Bennett would have been the better choice.
He would have, yes. Tony Bennett has left us at the age of 96. I left my heart in San Francisco, R.I.P.
Tony Bennett, an amazing 60-year career. maybe longer, 70-year career for Tony Bennett.
Yep.
Passes today. How old did you say? 90?
96. He had Alzheimer's. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's about 6 years ago, and still kept performing because he remembered the words to his songs, but he couldn't remember your name if you told him it 10 seconds ago.
Yeah.
Which is surreal to me.
And it's I swear it's coming for all of us.
Sad.
You live long enough, and it feels like you get it.
Yeah.
Which is sad. Now I imagine Bumper to Bumper will have Ode to a Dead Guy, Tony Bennett.
And now it's time for Ode to a Dead Guy.
And I'm going to leave Tony Bennett for them.
Okay.
I want to talk about somebody that I think would be outside of the sphere of interest for Bumper to Bumper, and Dan Barrero, who passed yesterday. His name's Kevin Mitnick. Died at 59, so died young. But Kevin Mitnick is a very notable person in the right circles. He was the first celebrity hacker, computer hacker.
Ooh.
And his story is really fascinating. And I want to tell listeners a little bit about it over our final 10 or so minutes of the show. Kevin Mitnick was ultimately a mischievous hacker and not a malicious hacker. And that's one of the reasons that he became a celebrity hacker. It was very easy to root for Kevin Mitnick because even though he was legitimately hacking and he was breaking the law, he was doing it in a way that was effectively like a victimless crime in many ways. And I'll tell you more about that. He never hacked for money. He gained a lot of information, a lot of it's secret information, but he never resold it. He never acted on it. In fact, he lived in squalor and poverty for most of his life, at least until later in life, which I'll talk about towards the end of the story for Kevin Mitnick. Mitnick was for years on the run from federal authorities, and it's wonderfully cat and mouse, just like the feds trying to track any fugitive. He was a fugitive and on the FBI's most wanted list for 5 years.
Wow.
On the run. But part of the beauty of being a great hacker, especially in the late 80s and early 90s, is he was so far ahead of them. The feds were totally outgunned and outclassed technologically by Kevin Mitnick. Later, after being caught and ultimately getting out of jail in front of Congress in 2000, he said, "My hacking activity actually was a quest for knowledge, the intellectual challenge, the thrill, and the escape from reality." For Kevin Mitnick. Now, growing up, Kevin Mitnick was exactly the kind of kid you'd expect a computer hacker to be. He was overweight, he was socially awkward, and he was very, very smart. One of his first hacks as a teenager, he was able to tap into his local McDonald's and he took over the drive-through microphone and he would prank people that would drive up. They'd try to order.
Come on.
He'd try to order a Big Mac and his voice would come over the drive-through microphone. We only sell Whoppers now.
Oh, what? Am I at the right place?
Exactly.
Well, some of the clientele would think, considering they'd been smoking a little bit of you-know-what.
Not everybody that goes through the McDonald's drive-thru has been smoking anything.
No, but
I don't think.
Soon here in this state, they will be.
August 1st, right?
That's right. August
1st.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Kevin Mitnick was hacking in the late 80s and the early 90s. So this is all by dial-up modem. The old days, screeching phone lines.
Is before
that is
dial-up.
That is the sound. That is those days. Now, he'd frequently mask his true location. You'd dial up an ISP in Chicago, then you'd route your call to a second ISP, say in San Jose, and then route that call again to another ISP. This one might be in Baton Rouge, and that would make it very hard for anybody to track down Kevin Mitnick. He'd be able to mask his phone service. You couldn't tell if he was working through the Sprint network or then the MCI network, which he had all kinds of tools at his disposal to be able to hide from the feds. At 16 years old, Kevin Mitnick hacked into Digital Equipment Corporation. This is one of the biggest computer companies in the world at this time, late 80s. At 16, though, he makes the mistake about bragging about his hack and even providing the password that he used to hack into to his online buddies, and they turned him in to the feds. And at 16, Kevin Mitnick gets arrested for the first time. But the feds don't even know what to do with that at that point, and he's a minor, so he just gets a slap on the wrist, doesn't do any time or anything, and he's back out hacking again. At 17, Kevin Mitnick hacked Pac Bell. At 18, he hacked USC. At 22, he hacked Santa Cruz Corporation. At 25, he hacked DEC again. He hacked dozens and dozens of others and never got caught. And most of these hacks we didn't even know about until years later when he was out of jail and he'd written his biography. In time, Kevin Mitnick would do 4 years of a 5-year sentence. And at one point, they stuck him in solitary confinement for 8 months because somebody convinced authorities that Kevin Mitnick could launch America's nuclear arsenal by whistling into a phone. There was such a huge misunderstanding of what hacking meant and what you could do that they honestly thought that if Kevin Mitnick was allowed access to any phone, he could whistle into the phone and start World War III.
So I think what happened was they were watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And when Willy Wonka took that whistle and used to whistle for the Oompa Loompas, I think that's where he got the idea from. What do you think? No?
It's as strong as any of the other arguments
I
that
think
the feds
so,
would have
yes.
had.
And it's also as ridiculous.
Now, the fascinating thing about Kevin Mitnick was almost all of his big hacks came from what's called social engineering, not technical prowess, social engineering. He would impersonate employees all the time. And he'd make a phone call to a company pretending to be the employee and then would convince the company to just tell him passwords or tell him access points into the company.
So he was one of the original Jerky Boys. Is that what you're telling me?
Not exactly like prank calls, but a little bit. Now, to pull off the impersonation, Kevin Mitnick would have to do extensive research on the company and that industry they're in. He'd have to learn it so well that when you call up the company and you talk to the tech support people, you sound like one of them. Took tons and tons of research. But that was all of his great entry points, was through social engineering. He would go through the garbage of companies, go through their garbage. He'd see all the written correspondence. He would learn technical manuals. He would go through printed out correspondence back and forth so he could learn how they talk, the language that they use, their abbreviations, so he could learn to talk like the employees. At 17 years old, Kevin Mitnick brazenly walked into a Pac Bell office, made himself at home, found a bunch of computer manuals that he would ultimately need to hack them, and then walked out. Got away with it. Now, I mentioned earlier that Kevin Mitnick was a celebrity hacker. He never really hurt anybody, never gained financially, as I mentioned before. The feds would try to pin a $300 million damage amount on Kevin when they took him to trial. But what they never understood is, and they kind of got away with it, is that he would download software that was worth $300 million in totality, including the R&D and the programming time and everything else. But he just had a copy of it. When he hacked Nokia and he had a $100 million operating system for their phones that he had downloaded, Nokia wasn't out the $100 million. They still had their software, but he had a copy of it just sitting on a hard drive at home. And he never distributed the software to Nokia software. He never monetized it. Yet, he was one of America's most wanted criminals. Ultimately, they'd make a movie about him called Takedown, which was about the FBI's efforts to find Kevin Mitnick and track him for years. And they eventually did find him. And it took all kinds of technical expertise to go unravel all the hoops that he had jumped through to mask his identity. He had lived in Las Vegas for years, it had turned out. And then ultimately they tracked him down in Raleigh. Kevin Mitnick's story, however, ended pretty well. He became one of the most celebrated cybersecurity consultants in the world. After getting out of jail, he spent the remaining 20 years of his life helping companies avoid people just like him. Cybersecurity and cyber theft. Kevin Mitnick died from pancreatic cancer yesterday at the age of 59. Robbie, thanks for your help today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Charge. Anytime. Looking forward to getting started with the football season and Fantasy Football Weekly. Folks, go out to Treasure Island. Go to this training camp. I'm telling you.
August 12th.
Get the information. Yes.
The Fantasy Football Training Camp. It's back after 3 years through the pandemic. We were gone. We're back. August 12th.
Back with
Treasure Island. I encourage you to play in a Guillotine League this weekend. Lots of drafts are going to be starting. You can do that as well. GuillotineLeagues.com. My cheat sheet is there for free. Fantasy Football Weekly will drop in a few hours. So that'll be exciting for this weekend as well. Thanks for listening, everybody. Common Man coming up next.
I can't wait. I can't hold on any longer. Ain't getting no stronger. Every day. Good time. Entertainment. Good time. Anytime you meet a friend. Good time. Anytime you're out from under. Not getting hassled. Not getting hustled. Keeping your head above water. Making a wave when you can. Temporary layoffs. Good times. Easy credit rip-offs. Good times. Scratching and surviving. Good times. Hanging in a job. Good times. Ain't we lucky we got 'em? And he's loose.
We're coming. We're coming.